What is going on, Pooj crew? Welcome into the newest episode of the Poojie Podcast. Man, it has been a while since I've gotten to do this and been able to welcome in the Pooj crew back for a podcast episode, but I appreciate you guys being here to listen. We got some golf content for you today. Jaguars content will be coming up as the fall quickly approaches, but in the meantime, we're going to jump into some golf content as we did previously. But really, again, thank you for being here to listen, and I want to welcome in Kyle Key back onto the podcast. It's been a minute for you too as well, brother.
Yeah, happy to jump back on this and talk about the Open Championship coming up. And as you mentioned, maybe getting into the NFL season and the Jaguars season, over the course of the next month or so.
Hey, it's perfect. The two seasons don't really overlap all that much. There is the FedEx Cup fall that begins in September with the Fortinet Championship this year. Obviously, the President's Cup up in Montreal. But for the most part, the two seasons do a pretty good job of staying out of each other's way.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we wrap up the golf season, I know the President's Cup, obviously the Golf Olympics, and then the playoffs championship should kind of conclude sometime in the beginning of September, I think, or end of August. So
yeah, it'll be I think September 1 is the Tour Championship Sunday this year, 2 weeks before Fortinet Championship, which I know everyone has circled on their calendar. But what we're here to, it actually falls, I think, opening week or second week of the NFL. So not too much sure how much traction that'll get. But we're here to talk about the Open Championship, more popularly known maybe here in the States as the British Open, more formally known worldwide as the Open Championship. Fourth major of the year, final major of the year. As you did reference, we do have the Olympics coming up as well, which is always a big deal for the athletes playing for their countries. But on the tour schedule, another co-sanctioned event with the DP World Tour, as the Genesis Scottish Open was this past week as well. Open Championship, Royal Troon. Kyle, how are you feeling about this week?
Yeah, this is probably, I'd say, my second favorite major. I mean, the Masters is kind of, I feel like everybody's default favorite major. The reason why I love this one, I love being up early. I love watching them struggle with some of the wind and some of the rough. Obviously, the courses are generally pretty open. A lot of bunkers to deal with. You're not really having to deal with too much hitting over water, things like that. But it's just really cool waking up early in the morning. It's like 5 a.m. and there's already groups finishing up their round on especially Thursday and Friday. I love the big greens. Sometimes you get those greens that are massive where they have like 2 flag sticks, from adjacent holes. So always like this championship and looking forward to the weekend.
Yeah, there's this interesting moment that happens for me every night, starting Wednesday into Thursday, all the way to Saturday into Sunday. I get up middle of the night, use the restroom, and then I have to talk myself out of staying up to watch the golf because I know it's on and I'm already awake. So why not just stay up and watch it? Are you one to set an alarm and get up and watch it, or if it just works out that you wake up, you get up?
Yeah, definitely set an alarm. The last couple of years, I've taken the Friday off, and I'll just stay up pretty much all night, or take a little nap from like midnight to 3 a.m. or something like that. But yeah, and then once the weekend's here, love just being up. I'll try to set the alarm. Saturday, Sunday, maybe set the alarm for like 6 a.m. Make sure I see the final groupings tee off and all of that.
Yeah, I mean it's truly must-watch TV, and it's great to have it happening that early in the morning. And I think for a lot of us here in the States, especially here on the East Coast, we get the special treatment, if you will, for most TV times, whether it's the Super Bowl being in California, we still get it at 6:30. They get it at 3:30. Mm-hmm. This is one of those rare events that we do have to kind of bend the knee to the sports gods and actually get up to watch. But we did have the Genesis Open this past week, which Scotland's owned Robert McIntyre got the victory with a scorching, I believe, 3 under final 3 or 4 holes to claim the victory and come out victorious. Did you catch much of that to get you in the mood for some Scottish golf?
Yeah, I love the Scottish Open. I think they have the Irish Open too that the DP World Tour does, or they used to, and that maybe is next week, or maybe that already happened. But there's kind of a stretch of like 3 good tournaments that are in this time frame. I did watch the Scottish Open. Big fan of Bobby Mack, so happy that he got the win. What I thought was interesting, and it might be like this with the Open Championship as well. there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different countries in the top 4. There was a tie for 4th place, but 8 different representatives. Scotland, you had Adam Scott, obviously Australia, Frenchman. Then you had Aaron Rai, English, Rory, Northern Ireland, Sun JM, of course, South Korea, America, and then Åberg as the Norwegian. So I think that happens. There's a lot of people that are from the DP World Tour that are used to playing in Europe that play in this event and play the link style golf. So it makes the competition at an all-time high.
Yeah, no, and that's what's really fun about this is I don't want to say it's anyone's game because that's a little cliche, but I think when you have the tour players from the States going to England or to Europe, and having to kind of adjust their game a little bit, playing a style of golf they're not accustomed to, that link style golf that you always hear about, like you mentioned, the green sizes, your game just completely changes, and it kind of feels like a home field game for those guys from the DP World Tour that do get maybe a leg up in those situations. Now you have plenty of players from the tour that are very capable over there playing in those events. Scottie Scheffler being one, Rory McIlroy being another, which I'm sure we'll get into those guys. But it is great to see that the talent all rise to the top, especially in those events that we don't necessarily see here. Bobby Mack, you mentioned one of your favorite players, one of the players you follow closely. Did you see that story back when he won the RBC Canadian Open? His dad was on the bag. His dad was caddying for him, made the flight last minute just to caddy for him. How unbelievably cool was that moment?
Yeah, it's amazing. That was his first tour victory, I believe. And then to get a win, at the Scottish Open, 2 weeks later or whatever it was, just amazing. Obviously, to do it with your dad on the bag and be a young kid like that is just awesome to see.
Totally. We'll see if he can go back-to-back weeks here in Scotland, win some home country events. Let's get into this course real quick. Royal Troon hasn't hosted since, I believe, 2016. Henrik Stenson won from Sweden. Maybe Ludvig going to try and recreate some of that Henrik magic this week at Royal Troon. Get his first major under his belt after winning his first tour event last year in November at the RSM Classic. Par 71, 7,300 yards is this course. The greens you had mentioned earlier, they are relatively smaller compared to most of the links style courses. However, it is still going to be your standard setup, kind of coastal, right near the water, tons of open fairway, tons of open opportunity for success and failure. We've seen crazy things happen on these courses. I believe it was Cam Smith putting from like behind a bunker and just kind of used it like a NASCAR ramp to go around a few years ago. What are you looking forward to in this course or this type of setup in general?
Yeah, and I know you mentioned some of the greens, and I think they got one, the par 3, that's like called the postage stamp or something to that effect, where it's kind of tight. It's protected by some bunkers, as most of the greens are. And I think we can definitely see some players get in trouble that don't hit that green, whether they get tied up in the rough or in some of those bunkers that are, known for their difficulty of getting out of. I did, I looked up the yardage and I was kind of comparing it to the U.S. Open. The par 4s average about 430 yards, which is about 30 yards shorter than the par 4s at the U.S. Open. They have 3 par 5s, and a lot of times, we'll see only 2 par 5s where it's par 70. Par 5s obviously lead to more birdie opportunities for these guys. Maybe we see some big birds too. But yeah, that was just something I was thinking about. Usually, you need length off the tee and all of that. If the average par 4 is playing 430, even somebody that's maybe middle of the road driver hits it 290 or so, they still might have a pitching wedge or a short iron into the green. So that'll be interesting to watch. And then also to see how these players start. One thing I did notice, just back to the par 4s, the first 3 holes are all par 4s, 366, 389, and 376. So they're all under 400. I feel like that provides some opportunity for some early birdies out there. And then hole 4 is a par 5. So you're looking at another birdie op there. Then you got a par 3 after that, and then another par 5. So the first 6 holes, there's going to be some birdie ops, whether it's because of the shorter par fours or just the par fives in general, giving you a chance to score.
No, and I'm glad you went into those stats so in depth there, because I was going to touch on that. The first 7 holes on this golf course, dating back to the 2016 Open with some more recent data taken into account, 4 of the first 7 played under par in 2016. 1 of the final 11 played under par in 2016. Wow. And that was the only par 5 on the back 9, number 16. Number 4, the par 5, played a quarter of a shot below par. And then number 16 played about a fifth of a shot below par. Everything else was, if it was below par, it was very minimal. And then everything else, starting at number 8, moving through the turn and into the back 9, if you're not hitting the ball straight or playing well or confident, you might be able to get away with a few shots early in this tournament at this course. But if your shot gets away from you towards the turn, I mean, it could spell disaster. And you mentioned the bunkers. Justin Thomas leading the Genesis Scottish Open after round 1. There was that video that came out of him in the pot bunker. It took him like 3 shots to get out of it, ended up collapsing. Everyone thought, okay, JT's back. And then the bad JT came back. So these types of courses can reward you, and then they can bite you just as easily.
Yeah, certainly. And it's definitely a mental game with these bunkers, or you have an instance like JT going through that. It can totally derail your round or potentially the tournament, especially if you go back into a bunker later in the round and all you're thinking about is how it took you 2 or 3 shots to get out last time. Definitely, rewards staying in the fairway. Tough rough from what I saw at the, I did a flyover on Google. And kind of looking at some pictures, looks like the roughs can be tough, but just because you hit it in the fairway or towards the green with those bunkers kind of scattered all throughout the course, it makes it tricky, especially with the undulations down the fairway. It could be rolling and then roll its way right into a bunker. Yeah, no, completely. It's you have to be artistic almost with the golf club in these moments. And we remember last year's Genesis Scottish Open when Rory beat Bobby McIntyre. He flighted that low 2-iron stinger on the last hole out of the rough, kind of that stringy lie that he had there. But those are the types of shots you have to make in these tournaments and kind of stay out of harm's way as best as you can. But those types of shots, only the really great players are capable of making those. So it does kind of narrow the field in that regard. But let's get to the field. Teeing off first, honorary starter. No, I'm kidding. Justin Leonard. Just had to say my pseudo namesake, 1997 winner at Royal Troon, teeing off first. Just had to give him a shout. Personally, I wanted him to be the Ryder Cup captain. Not that anyone saw Keegan Bradley being announced the Ryder Cup captain, but Justin Leonard teeing off. But Kyle, this field, you had mentioned some players, some names. Obviously, the big boys are here to play, as a lot of them were last week. I think only Finau and Scheffler were and Cantlay were like the 3 of the top 15 that didn't play Genesis Scottish Open. They'll be back in action, of course, as will the rest of them. What are you looking forward to with this field? Who do you have your eyes on? Yeah, and just speaking of Justin Leonard, and I love the thing about, this tournament, and I know Tiger even alluded to it, that he's like exempt and able to play for how many ever years. I love the majors because you get to see some of these older guys, previous champions that maybe aren't as active on the tour, or even guys that have gone to live, like Louis, for instance, who gets to come back. He won in 2010. So I do always love seeing some of those big names, even if they're a little older or on the Tour of Champions now. I did write some names down, some guys that have currently been hot, some guys that I always like to look at for courses that are being played overseas. Starting with Fleetwood, he's been playing pretty well. He's an Englishman. I feel like he's got a lot of experience playing these types of courses. I know I alluded to being in the fairway. Fleetwood leads, he's 5th in driving accuracy. He's very good at scrambling. I think he was 9th in scrambling and third from the rough. So even if he finds himself in a bad position, he can try to get up and down. Unfortunately, the approach is middle at best. I think he's like 104th in the approach side. His putting's, better than average, but just for the driving factor and the fact that he's able to get himself out of trouble, I do like Fleetwood. He's been playing pretty well lately. I think he was top 5 at the Scottish. So he's somebody I got my eye on. And I know you mentioned Finau, who, surprised some of these guys don't want to play the Scottish. I know it's a lot of travel and they have family. Obviously Finau's got a ton of kids. But just playing in the Scottish Open in a similar setting, I feel like gives you such an advantage to just kind of understand it and get acclimated to it. He's great on the approach. He's got 5 top 10s this year. The driver is what's going to maybe get him in trouble. He can kind of spray it all around the course. And again, just depending where you land up, it could be detrimental.
Real quick, going back to Tommy Fleetwood, I'll give you 2 guesses to tell me his last miscut in a golf tournament.
I mean, the fact that it's coming up, I feel like it's got to be a while. Let's go with the U.S. Open last year.
No, I will say it was on this year's tour schedule. It was on this calendar year.
All right, I'll go with the Players' Championship.
It was the week just before. API missed the cut.
Okay. So that was back
which was kind of an interesting miscut considering it was a signature event, but because it was an invitational, they had the whole top 50 and then anyone within 10 strokes of the lead. So an interesting miscut there for him. But that was his first tournament in almost a month since playing at Riviera at the Genesis Invitational back in February. So first, only miscut of the year was that tournament. So he's very, we know how Fleetwood is year in and year out. He's a top 20, top 15 machine. T34 at the Genesis, 15th at the Travelers, 16th at the U.S. Open, T20 Memorial, T21 RBC Canadian Open. He has been top 25 or better in all the majors this year. And why wouldn't we believe he could improve on that over in Europe at the final major of the year? So I do like that Tommy Fleetwood nod there. And you mentioned Tony Finau as well. He is a guy who has been open about his priorities when it comes to golf and being the family man that he is. He has come out and said that he is willing to kind of maybe skip some events to spend more time with the kids. But you would think that this would be the one time. It's like you got to get that tune up in, especially coming into a new continent to play golf. But I'm sure he will be very prepared for that. I'm looking at he's coming off 3 top 10s in a row. Actually, Memorial T8, US Open T3, and then Travelers is a T5 for him. Bryson DeChambeau obviously just won the US Open, so I guess he's the reigning major winner at the moment. Xander obviously won the PGA, Scottie won the Masters, but Bryson DeChambeau, thoughts on him? Not really getting to see a lot of him in the golf world, but when he does show up, second at the PGA, first at the U.S. Open, where's the meter on Bryson as he goes over to Europe?
Yeah, I had him written down as well. You alluded to first at the U.S. Open, second at PGA, and tied 6 at the Masters. He's only played 3 tournaments this year. That includes the traditional kind of PGA Tour players in the field. A lot of questions about how the live guys would translate coming back. He's only played 3 tournaments with kind of the majority of his cohorts, top 6 for all of them. Toughest fields, tough courses. It's very impressive. I think he's probably in a great space mentally. Getting a lot of money obviously helps that, but also everything he's done on the side, the YouTube, he's likable. It sounds like the crowd's behind him. I mean, just at the U.S. Open, obviously they're rooting for him because he's American and he was up against Rory. But I think people genuinely like him, and that probably puts him at ease knowing that he's not being the butt of a lot of jokes or, this incident with the rope and making fun of that and becoming memes and all of that. So I've always liked Bryson. I think the way his mind works and how he approaches golf is interesting. And making the YouTube and a presence on that, growing the game, I love. So, yeah, I mean, him, just the driving accuracy, we saw it at the U.S. Open. He was able to survive, but he was so uncomfortable on that back 9 off the tee. pretty much the whole round, everything was going left or right into the rough, and he's had a scramble. As they've mentioned a ton of times, though, his short game has gotten so much better. The finesse around the green, the touch, a lot of the putting. So I'm certainly high expectations for him. We'll see what he does. I think it'll certainly come down to him playing smart off the tee and giving him a chance to score.
In that Sunday at the U.S. Open, believe he had that cracked driver situation too, where he had to put his gamer driver away because he had flattened the face, which I'd love to be able to hit a golf ball that hard to flatten the face of my golf club. So kind of overcoming some adversity there. And then obviously with Rory, not that he's Captain Clutch in the past decade, being able to close out majors, but to be able to overcome Rory taking the lead and what felt like a ton of momentum on that Sunday, to come back and hit probably the best shot of his career out of the bunker, I would say, especially with the result that it yielded. Obviously a great name this week. And I think the thing with Bryson is the second he stopped taking himself so seriously, a lot of people around the country and golf world started taking him more seriously. So it has been a kind of a career and persona renaissance for Bryson since he's been able to kind of commit more time to these passion projects and YouTube golf and those things, which has been fun. But his track record at the Open, not the greatest. Last 5 results, he only has one top 30, which was an 8th in 2022. But again, we haven't really seen him since this turnaround over this season. So could be someone to keep an eye on. Someone I'm looking at, just to say this, Xander Schauffele, which is obviously a very obvious name to mention. He has 6 straight top 15 finishes on tour, and he has not finished worse than 41st at the Open Championship, dating back to 2018, which was a runner-up finish that year with Rory McIlroy in 2018. So he's a guy that knows how to play that type of golf. I believe he has the longest consecutive cut streak on tour with 51, I want to say. So we talked about Fleetwood's consistency. Xander is like the Hulk compared to Fleetwood when it comes to making cuts. What are your thoughts on Xander?
Yep, had him as a name written down. When you look at his stats, it's basically, other than Scottie as the leader in most strokes gained categories, Xander's like top 12 in almost all of them. He's 12th for strokes gained off the tee, 10th in putting, 5th in the approach, and he's 1st in scrambling. So he can kind of do everything. We talked about accuracy, hitting the green, hitting the fairways. That kind of all stacks up to this suiting his game pretty well. And then, like I said, the scrambling, such a big piece. Obviously, not every shot's going to be perfect that you hit, but being able to get out of trouble that you put yourself in is something that I do look at. Being able to recover and save par is so massive, especially in these majors where there's so much competition and good golfers playing.
I think the one thing that does scare me about him looking at these numbers now is his recent form around the green. If you take out the U.S. Open, he's lost strokes around the green in 3 of his last 4 events, including the Genesis, which he also lost strokes off the tee. His approach play and his ball striking is obviously never going to be a question. But at a links style course, which I guess, granted, sometimes the greens look like the fairway, like they all just kind of blend together. They're, not traditional rough and fringe type of atmosphere around the greens. You got to be really precise around the greens here because you can't expect every ball you hit to stick or to get the friendliest bounces all the time. So I hope that for Xander's sake, we see a U.S. Open gained 4.3 strokes to the field around the green versus the Travelers. He lost 1.2. So that's going to need to be something. But across the board, approach play, ball striking, everything, his numbers have been fairly off the charts. John Rahm is a name I wanted to bring up real quick, just because he's had quite a weird season in terms of injury, in terms of result. He made the move to live earlier this calendar year. Feels like he's a guy that people have maybe been waiting to kind of use that Bryson technique of like, okay, I've now gotten a little bit more free time. let's get some better results. And it just hasn't seemed to have been happening. Withdrew from the US Open, missed the cut at the PGA. I think at the time was the reigning Masters champion, didn't contend. So where's the pulse at on Jon Rahm? Do you have any indicator on him?
No, I didn't have him written down. I didn't have Scottie or Rory written down either, but they were kind of for different reasons. I expect Scottie and Rory to be in the mix, kind of goes without saying type of thing. So I figured we could skip over them. Rahm, on the other hand, just his recent form, whether it's injury, whether it's a mental situation, like he doesn't seem to be, when we've seen him at the PGA, he didn't really seem in it. At the US Open, obviously withdrawing. Don't watch him too much on the LIV, so I'm unsure of his game, but I don't believe he's won since being on the LIV. Don't quote me on that, but that's just a guess.
I think, is he on the Fireballs? Didn't they just win the team tournament this past
week?
Sergio?
With Sergio. So maybe they did, but how much does that really matter when it comes to this? So I do like Jon Rahm. I want to see him play well in these majors. I think for a while there, it was pretty much Scottie and Jon Rahm were the 1-2, throughout the 2022, 2023 kind of time frame. It was those two. One of them would win. So, I'll be interested. I hope that he kind of has a turnaround and maybe plays up to the competition that he'll be facing.
Yeah, we'll see. Third place finish 2021, runner-up finish last year. Of course, here to Brian Harman, who just ran away from the field. We haven't even touched on him. He's had somewhat of a quiet year. We'll get to him shortly. I want to play a game with you real quick. If it came down to Morikawa, Hovland, and Cantlay, rank those players in order of finishing position this week at the Open.
Yeah, I put Colin up at number one. I almost had him written down. He likes to play links golf. He's been quoted saying it before. It's kind of alluding to the inception of golf and when it all started in Scotland and playing on those links type of course. So I think there's some respect there. I think that makes him want to play even better. He strikes the ball so well. He's great with the wedges and the irons. You said Cantlay and who?
Hovland.
I'll go Cantlay second. I'm not a huge Cantlay guy, but he is pretty consistent. Kind of plays just the boring brand of golf, as people say, pretty much down the middle. He putts pretty well, I think. And then Hovland, I like Hovland probably the most out of all those guys, but I feel like as of this season's almost been a letdown for him, at least some of these majors recently. I feel like he hasn't been as in contention as much as we maybe thought.
Yeah, Hovland, best result so far. He had that third place finish at the PGA.
Okay.
But since then, 15th at the Memorial, 20th at the Travelers, missed the cut at the US Open, 46th at the Genesis Scottish Open. So I mean, it's been a pretty like 2022 Hovland, kind of before he boomed and before he peaked a little bit. 2022 Hovland. He's got to find some form, but so does Wyndham Clark. Last name I kind of want to throw out there. We could go through all these guys. Wyndham Clark, great start to the season. Runner-up to Scottie at Arnold Palmer Invitational. Runner-up to Scottie here in the backyard, Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, at the Players, back-to-back weeks. Still made a nice $3 million plus on those two runner-up finishes. Could have had close to $8 million had those tournaments gone differently for him. But miscut at the PGA, miscut at the Memorial, 56th at the US Open. Guy hasn't really been doing too much of anything positive until 9th at the Travelers, 10th at Genesis. Do you think that there's a chance for him, major winner, a guy who's started hot this year, fell off, a guy like Wyndham Clark? I know it's a random name, but
he's a major winner. He deserves to be talked about and discussed in these conversations. I was going to say the last two tournaments have been good for him. Top 10 in both of them. Does he have a chance to win? Sure. I mean, most of these guys do. Will he? I would say no. I think maybe top 20 is realistic. Could definitely get to the top 10, but just another guy that's kind of doesn't have that boom like some of these other guys we're talking about. I'd put him in that kind of Patrick Cantlay camp where people know he's good, but he's not like moving the needle on the excitement level necessarily.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You have any other names you want to toss in the ring for us to chat about, or?
Yeah, the only other two I had written down, Aaron Rai. He's been great lately. Another dude that is excellent off the tee. I think he's 10th in strokes gained, 7th in strokes gains on the approach. Somebody that's been very relevant this season in a lot of tournaments. I think he wears 2 gloves. He's got the iron cover, so just some funny oddities about him. But yeah, looking at his track record, tied 7th at the John Deere, tied 4th at the Scottish Open, tied 2nd at the Rocket Mortgage, and then top 20 at the U.S. Open. So his last 4 tournaments have been very good. He's, around the green and putting a little better than average, nothing crazy special, but he keeps the ball in play and he gets it on the green. So Aaron Rai is definitely a name to look out for. Also an Englishman, probably familiar with a lot of link style golf. And then the other name was Shane Lowry, just somebody that I always have an eye on during majors. Again, a UK guy, or excuse me, I shouldn't say that. He's Irish. But coming from over there, familiar with the link style golf. He's has 5 top 10s this year as well. Not the best putter, but pretty good off the tee. So we will see how Shane Lowry does. I've always liked him and would love for him to be in contention.
Real quick on the Aaron Rai front, this is kind of interesting. Dude's numbers off the tee are pretty outstanding. He gained 4.3 strokes off the tee at Charles Schwab out at Colonial, and gained 5 strokes off the tee at RBC Canadian Open. Didn't top 10 in either because he lost 4.6 strokes putting and then 3 strokes putting at RBC Canadian Open. But his putting, this is crazy. His putting, he hasn't gained less than 2.8 strokes since the U.S. Open at Pinehurst. So this putting turnaround has obviously directly yielded all of these fantastic finishes for him over the last month and a half or so. Hasn't had a missed cut since an additional event at the Corrales Punta Cana Championship, which I think was the same week as RBC Heritage. He played at Corrales. So interesting note there. I think he did change coaches actually, but if his putting is right and putting on these courses isn't as paramount to success because 80% of the battle is getting it even near the hole to be able to putt.
Right.
So yeah, that's actually a really good name to throw out there. And then obviously same with Shane Lowry. He's just a guy that seems to, there's no real code to figuring him out. He just kind of always is in the mix and a good guy to follow at these tournaments. So let's get into some picks as we wind down here on the much anticipated return of the Poojie Podcast. Let's get into some picks. We'll go. What do you want to do? Sleepers, top 20, top 10 win, or
sure
long shot? What do you feel?
Yeah, we can do a long shot to win, and then top 20, top 10, and winner.
Yeah, that works. Let's do that. So, if you want to get us started, you want to start at top 20?
Let's do top 20.
Okay.
I think I will go with, I'm kind of going to base it off these names that I had written down. I'm sure the odds.
More power to you.
Yeah, I'm sure the odds aren't great on some of them. I'd imagine the longest odds for a top 20 out of these are Shane Lowry, which I will certainly take. Someone that's had a lot of experience in majors. Like I said, he hits the ball pretty well off the tee, keeps it in plane. He's good with the approach and 5 top 10s this year. I'll take Shane Lowry.
Okay, fair enough. Shane Lowry. I'm going to go with a guy who played well at the Open last year and has been playing well the last month or so. Actually has 5 top 10s in his last 8 tournaments. Sungjae Im for a top 20 at plus 210. He did finish 20th exactly last year, but missed the cut back in 2019. But he's been playing really well of late. Finished 4th at the Genesis Scottish Open, which I think if you're going to take recent form into account for any week, it's this week here. Looking at what happened at the Genesis Scottish Open is a huge indicator. So I'm going to go with Sungjae Im there at plus 210. Kyle, for you for a top 10.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm getting the app pulled up to see what some of these odds are at.
No,
but
good.
for top 10, I will go. Give me Give me Fleetwood. Give me Tommy Fleetwood for top 10, going back to the driving accuracy and kind of his ability to scramble. Putting approach needs some work, but I like how he's been playing lately. I've always been a fan of him.
Okay, Tommy Fleetwood. I'll go with I'm between two names actually. You know what? I'm going to go with Cameron Young.
Okay. I like that.
Cameron Young at plus 525. Other name I was thinking was Jordan Spieth, but I yielded on the side of caution with recent performance, and Cameron Young has 2 top 10s in his last 2 tournaments. So I do like him here. And in his only 2 appearances, he almost won in 2022 in his Open debut, which was the year that Rory almost won, and then Cam Smith ended up winning, and it was that crazy finish. I think that was at the old course at St. Andrews, I want to say. But Cam Young for a top 10, he's got 2 top 10s at the Open, 2 top 10s in his last 2 tournaments stateside. I'm going to go with him at plus 525.
Nice. Yeah, he's obviously been a relevant name, kind of the younger up-and-coming type guy, so I like that.
Would you say, real quick, because you picked Fleetwood for a top 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I picked Cam Young for a top 10. Neither of them have won a PGA Tour event up to this point.
Right.
Who gets there first?
I think Cam Young. I mean, he's younger and I don't know, kind of plays more. I feel like he's gone pretty low. We've seen him in tournaments where he's like shooting super, super low. I feel like Fleetwood, he's great. I feel like, I don't know, Cam Young maybe can have a round where it's, 8 under, 9 under type of thing.
I like it. Yeah, no, Cam Young can pop any second. That's what he did on Sunday at St. Andrews to get back in the mix. But Kyle, your long shot pick for the, 151st U.S. Open?
152nd, I think.
152nd U.S. Open.
All right. So long shot, I feel like needs to be not in like the top 20 of picks, I guess.
I would say let's go with like plus 4,000 and beyond.
Okay. Then with that, I'm going to stick with the guy I wrote down, Aaron Rai. He's plus 6,000 currently. He's been in the mix so much, probably one of the better people as far as current form is concerned. So I'm going Aaron Rai. Why not as my long shot winner?
Love it. Let's
and
do it.
I would say my other winner, just while we're on it, long shot winner, Aaron Rai. And then my winner, that's a little bit more traditional odds. I'm going with Xander. Obviously, I talked about him. I think he's got the 3rd best odds behind Rory and Scottie. Plus 1,200. So I'm going Xander and Rai as my winners.
If you know what's so crazy, and I like those picks, of course. We had talked on both of them earlier, and there's reason to be bullish on both of them. But what's crazy is as I'm looking at these odds, there are some huge names with such long odds, which I think just tells you just how kind of crazy this whole tournament could get. My long shot winner, I'm going to go with young Tom Kim. I have a good feeling about him. He runner up at the Travelers to Scottie, had a good finish there. 15th last week at the Scottish Open, finished 2nd last year at the Open on like that swollen foot, that rolled ankle situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go with him. And then for my winner, I don't want to go back to this, but I was so hurt for this guy after the U.S. Open. I'm going to go with Rory to get it done here at the Open Championship. 4th last week in Genesis, has a great track record at the Open Championship. I think that putting mishap at the U.S. Open, he avenges that this week with a win at Royal Troon for his first major in like 11 plus years. So anything else from you, Kyle, before we head out for the evening?
No, and definitely wouldn't be mad at the Rory pick. I don't want people to think that we're like Scottie or Rory haters. That's not the case at all. But to say that you think Scottie's going to win or, talk about how good Scottie is, I feel like it's just, redundant and obvious at this point.
Yeah.
So it could easily be, the return of Scottie. Hasn't played in a couple tournaments. So, and if Rory gets it done, that'd be great too.
Scottie 2 wins in his last 3 tournaments, teeing it up. 41st at the U.S. Open was the only one he didn't. Rory hasn't finished outside the top 15 in 3 months. So both of them are obviously just really good players. So Anyways, Kyle, hey, I appreciate you being here to talk about the Open, and we'll be tracking it all week long. Cannot wait for it, and thanks for the time. And Pooj Crew, thank you for being here as well. And tune back in next week. We'll have some more episodes covering all the golf content that you could dream of. But I appreciate you being here, and until next time, go make this world a better place, and take care.
How can I be the man when you're the man? How can I be the man when you're the man? How can I be the man when you're the man?